for me, right? Switching and transitioning, right? It's been a ride. I have to always learn, relearn, and unlearn some things as I go further, right? So I just hope we enjoy this session together. So I'm talking on design thinking, what design thinking is, the history of design thinking, why we need design thinking as product managers, the different stages of design thinking. And at the end of the lecture, we'll just have a workshop, rather, we'll have time to ask questions, right? And rub minds together on what we think we understand about design thinking. So, as I said, I'm happy to be here, so let's shoot for it. So, design thinking. So, if you've heard about design thinking a lot of times, or you've read about design thinking, or you've been in a different workshop or a product school talking about design thinking, they tell you it is a non-iterative process where you understand your users, right? Their challenges, and you profile solutions on where you can help them, right? So design thinking is essential to solving user problem, right? It's a point where stakeholders come together to understand the user's pain point, the user's gain points, and look for ways they can find solution to solve the user problem. As a product manager, my day-to-day activity, I use these processes a lot, right? Because yes, you carry the word product management, you can't do these things alone, right? You need to iterate with your team, you need to understand your user, and you need to be able to deliver value, right? So if you have a very good product, the best products, you've solved a particular solution and nobody is using your products, right? No matter how good that product is, no matter how good the code base is, that product is a fail, right? You have to carry your users along as you're building a particular product. And that's the essence of design thinking. The first thing is to understand who your users are, why your users need, you need to solve a particular problem for your users, and how you can iterate, you understand, come up with your team, do your research to solve like your user problem. So that's why you need design thinking as a product manager, your day-to-day activity. So this week alone, I know I've spoken to like a couple of users, right? And just an example, and they're saying, oh, we'll stop using your system if we don't have this. This is a problem for us. How can you solve? And they're just minor problems that, oh, I took my face off it. Like this problem is very little, but the user really required this, right? So I understood that was a pain point for users, and I had to call my technology team, right? And yeah, I have a settlement team. And look, I can prefer solutions for the user and give you a timeline, right, to solving that user problem, right? So that's the point where myself and the required team came together to provide a solution to solve a user problem. Right, so that's just all about design thinking, the non-linear creative process where your team comes together to understand your users' gain points and provide solutions to solving them. So moving ahead, we're going to talk about the history of design thinking. And like every other product management process, right, by Scrum, there's always an history to it. So for Scrum was cutting from, I think, baseball at the time, right? There was a history to why, oh, we needed to use Scrum in product management, the same way with design thinking, right? It dates back to the early 50s and 60s where architects and engineers come together to ensure that what they were solving for is actually going to be like a building that's going to stand. So I don't know if we heard of Zaha Hadid. Zaha Hadid is a British Iranian architect, right? If you see her designs online, they're just always magnificent, right? You see some designs by Zaha and you'll be like, oh, how is this design standing? How was she able to do that? People will be like, oh, she's an edict for engineers, right? Because she draws crazy designs and oh, the engineers have to implement it. So there's a team thought process that goes into every of Zaha's Hadid's architectural designs to ensure that, yeah, these architects are, my designs are crazy, right? But how do I ensure that engineers can build this without the building falling? How do we come up? How do we structure the foundation? How do we raise it up? How many layers does this building need to have for it not to collapse? So all of those processes used to go on in our designs to ensure that she's delivering value. She's creating a design for a building that is not going to collapse in the future, right? So design thinking dates back to that time, right, where architects and designers need to come together, right? So and it has evolved over time. Design thinking is not only used in product management; it's used like in a variety of enterprise, right? You can have design thinking in your school. You can have design thinking as an architect. You can have design thinking in different different various sectors of the economy, just to ensure, just a process that ensures that we're coming up with a solution that is long lasting and very important, and most importantly, solves our user problem. So that's just like the history of where design thinking comes from, right? And you might be wondering, as a product manager, why do I need design thinking? So, one thing you need to bear in mind is this, right? You need to be able to identify who your stakeholders are, right? So you need to identify the stakeholders that are required for setting design thinking process. So let me give an instance, right, where I got a request from a customer, right? Although it was a technical aspect of what I was doing, but at that process, I needed to have my technology team on the call. I needed to have business and settlement, right? There are other teams within my company that are relevant to things I do, right? Well, I was able to identify the relevant stakeholders that were required for that particular feature that was brought in, right? So as a product manager, you need design thinking in everything you do. So maybe you must have known that product management sits at the middle of business, technology, designs, and the executive team. So you are that dot that connects everybody together to provide solution, to ensure that things are going as planned, to ensure that the product is delivering a certain value that it's meant to deliver, right? So as a product manager in your day-to-day activity, you need design thinking, right? So today alone, today alone, right, I've had about, let's say, 5 meetings, right? And my meetings cross across meeting my tech team, meeting some customers, and meeting stakeholders, right? So you need to be able to understand who your stakeholders are, right? Understand the problem you're solving for. As a product manager, this is something you do on a daily basis, right? Understanding your product, customer pain points, understanding their gain points, and providing solutions to how you can solve their problems. And one thing I would like us to bear in mind is most times, right, as a product manager, I get stuck on what is required of me to do, right? And you should be able to know the stakeholder. Maybe it's the engineering stakeholder you need to meet at a particular point to get understanding of what to do. You should be able to know if it's an executive stakeholder you need to know to meet to understand what you need to do, right? So your aim as a product manager is meeting customer requirements, meeting customer needs. So that is why you need design thinking as a product manager, right, in your daily activities to be able to solve problems. So it is something you do, let's say every day or weekly as a product manager. There's something you interface with, right? Interfacing with the different things, interfacing with your customers, and also interfacing with stakeholders. So since you are the middle between business and every other team required, it's not connecting them all, right? So design thinking is something that required of you as a product manager on your daily basis, right? So when you check for stages, we're going to the stages of design thinking, right? If you go online to check for stages of design thinking, you see things like empathize, defining the problem, ideating and collaboration, prototype, and stage 5. A lot of people like to put stage 5 as testing, but over time, right, I've discovered stage 5 for me for design thinking has been implementation, right? Of which implementation is divided into different parts, right? So empathizing is understanding your customers, defining and researching, right? Defining is being able to put that um research in a document, understanding what the document is, understanding what your problem is, defining it properly for your team members. Ideating is collaborating with everybody, getting all stakeholders together to meet, you collaborate. Prototyping is where you come up with probably low fidelity or high fidelity prototypes to use, right, as a product manager to actually automate processes faster. Then implementation, right, which a lot of people just put number 5 as testing, is where I now come to and say, okay, for implementation is where we have development. At the same time, where we now have the testing that people put as number 5, right? It's actually a very important feature to me, number 5, to have it as implementation, right? Because that's where the work really goes into. And that's why it has been broken down by me. And after much research and working as a product manager for some time as development and testing, right? So we are going to be looking at each of these stages of design thinking. We'll be talking about these different stages, how you can use these different stages, or what is required of you for these different stages of design thinking, right? So we're going one after the other, talking about them, right? So I don't know if you ask questions in between or you wait after the course to ask questions. So however way it is, so I'm entertaining questions, right, on design thinking. So let's just take these stages, which is very important to us, one after the other, right? So we have the empathy stage. This is actually the foundation of design thinking, right? You need to understand the problem you're solving. No matter how good you are as a product manager, right? I tell people one of your um, best things to do as a product manager is communication, right? That's like your 7%, 70% activity. But there's a place for research. I remember when I was going into fintech and I was asked, "Oh, you've not worked in fintech. How do you want to do this? You're working in device management, device inventory. So how do you think you're going to cope in fintech?" And one of the things I said is a product manager is good to the extent to which they can do research, right? So you should be able to research your problem, right? And you can do research in different ways. So ways that I've done research for a particular problem is this, right? So I've done research by going online, doing like normal Google search to understand certain things. And another way I've done research is meeting people who are experienced in a particular field. So while at STEM Analytics in Kenya, I did a research on device configuration. It was a SaaS company. It was unlike we've ever seen before. We need to understand how configuration works. I remember having a team in Kenya who I told to reach out to somebody and ask them questions like, how have you been doing configuration over time in your Chinese system? And we had a 2-hour session of him showing me how research was, how the configuration was done, how they had to connect the IP and port number to the Chinese system, how they had to the information that was required, right, to have the device configuration, right? So under part of research was reaching out to somebody who was experienced in that field, right? I documented the process and tried as much as possible to implement a replica of what they had on our system. Although we did not implement that end to end what they had, we found a different solution that works for us, right? By doing further research on how we could use the TCP server and all of that on our devices, right? So understanding the markets. So I've moved between different markets um, within Africa, right? And trust me, the market is different. The market for device management for me was different from the market of um, for device management. Okay, so for device management, I realized the market was moving slower, right, than the market for fintech. So as I said earlier, I had an issue with the customer that was like, well, I should solve a particular problem, or they moved their merchant from our system. That was something I did not experience in device management. It was a SaaS problem. There was no much solution outside in the market, right? Understanding that that market was moving slower than this particular market of fintech, where we have like over 1,000 fintechs in Nigeria, was quite different, right? So understanding the markets, you have to know your customers' pain and gain points, right? You can have the best solution and you're not solving any problem for anybody. For instance, in Nigeria, I think we have over 1,000 fintechs, right? And I recently came across a fintech doing the same thing as PD Vests, right? And I think I stumbled upon the product, not a developer in the company, and I started asking some questions, right? And the guy opened up to me and said like a lot of things. And I was like, so did you guys not realize Piggyvest has done all you need to do? Piggyvest has more leverage in the market. So why are you guys building this? Right? Like everybody just wants to build a fintech product, right? They had a good product. I did some testing for them. But at the end of the day, the product is good, but they were not meeting they were not solving for a particular problem. They were not like solving like a particular pain point for their customers. So if they were saying, "Oh, Piggyvest does not have these things, this particular feature, our customer needs it," so we're giving them a different solution or providing a different solution for them. Although they have a system like Piggyvest, but this is a pain point for users, right? Let's make sure our application has this. They were not doing that. They were doing exactly like they had a replica of what Piggyvest was doing, and it's like, see, these people in the market, you don't know, you are not solving any pain. So I was like, what are the previous users saying, right? What are their pain points? Can you actually look into that and solve this problem for them? And indeed, they could never answer the question. They could not think, okay, this is like the pain point they're seeing in Piggyvest. I was like, okay, see, you're building a great product. You have a good backend. You have a better interface, better design, right? But you're not solving any problem. You're not solving any pain for anybody. So you need to understand the customer's pain points and solve the solution for them. And that thing I think I realized over the week is I realized there are a lot of map systems you can integrate with, but people still tend to use Google Maps a lot. And I was like, oh, why is some of the solution already exists in the market? Are you saying um, Google, what payment are you solving? Is Google cheaper, more expensive than your solution, or what are you doing? Like, why are you having different maps in the system? Even within Nigeria, I realized some persons are building like a mapping system. I was like, okay, what pain point are you trying to solve? Google has done this thing, right? What are you doing differently, right? So you need to understand their pain points. So I already stated, how do you empathize as a product manager, right? By doing your online research, you are one Google search away to understanding a lot of things about your customers or a lot of things about like the open markets, just one Google search away. By conducting surveys, right? It's something I've done a lot of times for my products, conducting surveys and probably release a new feature. We want people to give us feedback or my customers to give feedback. We conduct surveys like, okay, this is what I want, this is what I want to see in the system. And another situation where you can use survey is when I joined my new company, like, right, the product I was giving, right, the product manager that I was leaving told me, oh, we solved all the problem, the backend is good, the application is stable, you just come and be solving small problems. That was the impression I was giving. I was coming to solve small problems. I was like, are they paying me this money to solve small problems? Really? So I conducted a survey internally, right, for the different things like this requirement. And I realized I was not yet to solve small problems, right? The problems I had to solve were not small in any way. Right. So by conducting surveys to understand what these are the pain points. And one of the surveys I conducted, it was so funny that the survey I conducted, I was able to come up with 50 different issues that the system had. And product manager was telling, oh, the system is perfect. But okay, where are we getting over 50 issues from? Right. And most of those issues were actually from our customers, right? From the customer success team that these issues have not been solved on the system. Right. So by conversing with your users, right? So how do you converse with your users, right? I've developed different mode of conversing with my users, right? So now I work with companies as users. I have like scheduled Google Meets with them to understand what they're going through. To tell me what their problem is and how we can improve their system. I've had issues where I converse with users in my previous company via WhatsApp. And it's so funny, right? That I had to create like a WhatsApp group for some drivers or device tracking the drivers that use tracking devices in Kenya, right? Because there was a gap between our location and I could not be calling them on my phone, right? We started to talking on WhatsApp, scheduling like bi-weekly meetings to talk to them on how their devices are behaving on the road and hear from them to see if their device is actually transmitting data. So that's another way I've been able to talk to customers, right? There are different modes you can talk to your customers, but please, as a product manager, you want to establish a good communication with your customers, right? Right. That is where you understand what problem your product has, right? I know there was a situation where when I was able to, where my team was able to crack the code for device configuration, right? We thought we solved all problems, right? We thought, okay, we gave them like a very simple solution for them to connect their devices to the system. But after having a call with one of the customer, right, the guy told me specifically, oh, I am new to this particular system, right? A lot of us have been used to this particular system. Why don't we do it like this? Why don't we just go this particular route? It's easier for us, right? The reason why we're opting for your product is not because we don't have a product out there. And the funny thing is they had a free product out there that they were using, right? But coming here to pay, we're charging them in dollars at that time to pay this money on your system. So what are you doing differently? I spoke with them, which was just one very simple feature, right? That I needed to add. Yes, the customer was satisfied at that particular point, right? By conversing with your customer support team. So this depends on the company you're working for. This depends on the company structure, right? So I've worked in different companies, and companies have different structure. There are companies where you converse with the business team to understand that, okay, this is the problem I want to solve, and this I want to achieve it, right? So my current company is talking with the customer support team. Depending on your structure of your team, right, you should know the exact stakeholder you should be reaching out to, right, or to get information, right? I've been in a company where there was nothing like a business manager, there was nothing like a customer support team. It's just you, the product manager, the team head who serves as the scrum master, and the technical team, right? So how do you converse with your customer in that point? There is no bridge that's linking the customer to you. There is no bridge. There's nobody standing in gap between you and the customer. Oh, they get customer requirements, certain times during the meetings with them, and you get what you need out of it, right? How do you do this, right? To reach out directly as a product manager. So conversing with your customer support team or conversing with your customer is dependent on the structure you have as a particular, it's dependent on the structure you have as a company, right? If your company structure stays, you converse with your business team to get customers to go that route. If company structure says there's a customer support team, you meet with them to interface with your customer, you go that route. But if the structure is, especially for startup, involves the product manager under your products, you find a way to converse with your products and with your customers, right? Do your research and get the information you need for them. Find a way to iterate on this, discuss with your team, and find a way to provide a solution for them, right? So that's just it on empathy. We're moving to the next stage of design thinking, which is um, defining the problem, right? At this point of defining the problem, you need to be able to identify the 4 Ws, the who, the what, the where, and the why, right? So to achieve the best of this process, it is important that research conducted at the empathy stage is well documented. This will help propel the collaboration stage better, right? So you need to understand what you're building a product for. What is the product, right? Where does the product present itself, and why does it matter? So, for example, let's say, someone sent a survey to me last week, and it's building a fintech product for 14-year-olds where their parents manage their accounts and see the activities that they do on that system. I was like, okay, you're building system for kids between the age of 9 to 14, according to them, right? Um, you identify who they are, their kids in the adolescent stage, right? What are you solving for them? You want them to have a bank account, or you want the parents to be able to monitor activities on that account, right? Where do you see your customers, right? Where does the product present itself? Why should a 9-year-old or 14-year-old have a bank account? Why should they need money to be spending? What are you going to tell the parents? Like, oh, your 9-year-old needs money. They should have an account where they can withdraw money, do some spending, but you can actually monitor it. I'm like, why does 9-year-old need money in their account, right? You need to be able to identify that particular problem. Why you're telling somebody, oh, you want to give your child an account where you can monitor it. And why does it matter? Like, why is solving for this particular problem? It's something you need to be able to identify as a product manager, right? And defining this problem, right, is reaching out to people, having a sit down with them. This situation I just spoke to you about adolescents having a bank account. You sit down with random parents and ask, do you think your child needs an account? What do you think? Ask questions like, what do you think? How do you feel about your child having a bank account? Right? Ask questions like that to understand if that problem is something that the market needs that you're willing to solve, right? So that you don't get go on building products that would be good, would be nice, but there's nobody using them. So you need to be able to define your products, your problem adequately by doing research, reaching out to people, and asking relevant questions. So the next is ideating and collaborate. So there's a question here. What do you think would happen if you get a bunch of smart people in a room to talk about getting solutions to a problem? So imagine about Einstein, okay, and our Frank Edo. Actually, I like the guy a lot. Frank Edo, um, who else again? Like a group of people that are very brilliant in a room to ask, and you bring a solution to them, or you bring a problem to them and ask them, see, let's talk about this problem. What do you think about this problem? Give me your 2 cents on this problem. What do you think will happen? Right? How do you think they'll be able to approach this problem and provide solution to you? Right? So it's just a question to think about on yourself is what do you think will happen when you put a bunch of smart people in a room to talk about a particular problem or another can bring solutions. So I've had situations where I did not understand the problem, right? I just was able to do like a mini research to understand a little bit of the problem and I need to collaborate with my team. So I reach out to the necessary stakeholders and be like, can we jump on a meeting? There's some questions I want to ask on this particular problem. How do you think we can solve it? So I remember joining feedback for the first time, right? I did not understand what we were doing. So what came to my mind is, oh, we have 1,000 fintech out there, right? They are doing the same thing. I can always go online and check what they're doing, right? Yeah. If my company is doing what PiggyVest is doing, I have a PiggyVest account, I can go there, look at what they're doing, and come up with my user stories, come up with what I'm doing. But then I entered an issue in a switching company, it was quite different. And I was like, oh, okay, so how do I understand the things that are going on the back end? How do I understand what we're doing, right? So once a problem presents itself, right, I know the stakeholders will call to a meeting and be like, okay, let's collaborate. Let's think about this, right? This is what the problem is. This is the problem we're facing. What do you think the solution to this problem can be? Right? So everybody's going to give their 2 cents. The technology team will give their 2 cents. A different team gives their 2 cents, and that team will be like, oh, what do you think about this? Right? So what I do is I document all of this process as everybody is talking, right? And be like, okay, this is a smart thing to do. This is what my team should do. This is what my team should implement. This is how we should do it. It's a brainstorming session between you and your team. So having a group of smart people who understand what you're doing in your room will really help you as a product manager. So one funny thing that happened to me is in my early years as product management, and it affected me a lot, is I was given a problem to solve. My boss was like, oh, go solve this. The customers are asking for this, blah, blah, blah. I approached product management the way I approached my degree. I was like, oh, I'm a lawyer. This is product management. I document a lot. And I remember doing research online. I was like, oh, this is what we're going to do without collaborating with the necessary members of team. And nobody reached out to me. I'm like, oh, you're doing the wrong thing. And I realized I presented a document that had nothing to. In my mind, the document was good, but my boss was like, "This was trash, right? Why didn't you meet?" And it was like, "Why didn't you meet this person to ask questions about him? Why didn't you sit down with this person to understand what this particular product is? He's been doing this for 2 years. He's still within the company. Why did you not just let him share this knowledge with you? There's a knowledge gap here. Why did you not make use of it?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a fool. Why did I not just do this?" Right? So interfacing with the right people within your team or calling meeting for the right people will really help you. So ideating and collaboration is a brainstorming session with team members to discuss the problems, solution, and the likely approach that will be taken, and the approach that will be taken to solve the product problem, right? Is brainstorming with the right people and coming up with a solution, right? Everybody brings the idea, you document, I'm like, this is the approach you should take. You have a discussion. Sometimes I've had discussions that go to 2, 3 hours, but as long as you come up with a solution, I'm fine. Right. So understanding the right stakeholders to call for a particular meeting and be like, okay, this is the problem. I've spoken with the customer about it. Um, I've done like a little research about it because you don't want to go to any meeting blank. That is all the truth. Okay, recently a request came to me on contactless transaction. We don't do contactless transaction in my office. And I was writing a requirement on it. Oh, it's still routing transaction. I'm the backend guy. I write the backend code. But still routing transaction. What will go wrong? And I want to be like, see, we don't process this kind of transaction here. A lot of things can go wrong. What we process is card transaction. You take your card to a POS, you put in your PIN, you withdraw. You take your card to an ATM, you put in your PIN, we route the transaction through the necessary routes, and you as a client to withdraw your money. We don't do contactless here. It's not something we've done, right? So whatever it is you're coming up with, whatever you think in your head was not going to work. So I had to do a research on what contactless was. Come to my team. We had like a collaboration. I'm like, okay, this is how we need to package this particular transaction. We tell the customer, say, package the transaction for like this for us, send it to us, we should be able to process the transaction. Right. So meeting the right person, right? I was able to know that see, this transaction was different from the normal POS transaction that I know of. Right. So how do you collaborate with your team? A key aspect of collaboration is producing ways to facilitate the process. This process can be facilitated by mailing and reaching out to relevant stakeholders. If you need to meet your team to prefer to collaborate on a date on a particular problem, you can reach them via mail and make sure you're sending the mail to the right person. And in your mail, you should be able to outline points of discussion. Maybe like, oh, dear all, I'm reaching out to you for this, for this, for that. And this is what we want to discuss. We want to discuss solutions to this particular problem. We want to get everybody's thought on this. We want to get feedback for this and that, right? We don't want to send email without properly defining the point of discussion. And at the end of the email, like at the end of this mail, we should be able to, at the end of this meeting, rather, we should be able to probably create a timeline for this. We should be able to reach out to the customer to see if this is something we can do for them, right? You need to be able to outline all of that for your team members to collaborate, right? You don't want to go into a meeting where there is no point of discussion. It just be like, oh, I said probably you use a Google Meet or Zoom Meet. You send a meeting out to your team members and boom, there's no point of collaboration. There's no point of discussion. You're not stating clearly to your team, this is what we want to talk about, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? People have a lot of things to do with their days, right? You should be able to define what you're calling in a meeting for. This is a corporate organization, this is a corporate place, right? You can't just call in a meeting without properly telling us the agenda for that particular meeting, right? So why do you need to collaborate? As I said, ask yourself a question. What do you think will happen if you bring a bunch of smart people to a room, right, to talk about solutions to a particular problem? You need to it makes brainstorming easier, right? If everybody gives their 2 cents on this. See, these people are experienced, probably have worked in this particular field, you work with them. You can't do it alone. You need to brainstorm with everybody, right? So they bring their different ideas. Oh, this is what this, I think this is what we can do. Like everybody brings their 2 cents, you brainstorm together as a team and find a way to prefer solution. Or you'll be like, oh, I go back to my drawing book, I'll document this properly and reach out to the team, probably for another brainstorming session to see what we can do. It improves productivity and gives a sense of purpose to the problem you're trying to solve, right? So you need a sense of purpose to what you're solving. If you're saying, oh, I've empathized with my user, right? I've defined this particular problem. This is what it is, right? Having a brainstorming session, you can explain what that problem is. It gives a sense of purpose to what you're trying to solve, right? So having a collaborative session makes people understand, oh, This is what we're trying to solve. Okay, this is what I think we should do. This is how we should do it, right? It is delivery of the solution in time, right? As I said earlier, I was working somewhere where I thought, oh, I could do my normal research and come up with a document and come to present to my team. And apparently I was doing the wrong thing. If I had met the right stakeholders, if I had met the right people and be like, oh, guy, let's have a one-on-one discussion. What do you think this is? You've been doing this for 3 years. Give me your 2 cents on it. I would have delivered the proper documentation to my boss and I would have done like the proper presentation. But because I thought, oh, yeah, I can do my research, Google knows it all. Well, Google disappointed me in that period. That's just the truth. So I got disappointed by Google. I came up with trash, right? It was later on when I was getting to understand the product, I realized, oh, this is trash. You didn't do this thing very well, right? So it is delivery of the solution in time. If I had collaborated in time at that period, right, it would have aided my delivery by 2 weeks, rather than me now going to the system, using the system, understanding some things, and organizing different meetings of people that have used the system before me, who are still in the company, right, to ensure that there was no knowledge gap, right? I would have delivered in 2 weeks and I would have delivered faster in time. It improves the way your team work together and improving a solution to the relevant problem, right? So collaboration improves teamwork, right? It aids teamwork. It helps with productivity. That's just the truth. It helps with productivity, and especially when you have a tight timeline, right? Because these are situations I've experienced where there's a tight timeline to deliver something, and I'll be like, oh, I meet with like necessary people, and I see myself so one thing about my work is I reach out to my interface with my customers from time to time. And having an additional collaboration session, right? A brainstorming session, let me put it that way, within my team has helped me deliver to customers or reply customers or give customer feedback in time, right? Because of the nature of what my work is, we have a lot of companies reaching out, oh, what do you want to do about this? And they're like, oh, and that's one thing about product management. Oh, she's a product manager. Run to her is a product. She can answer you right. So if I collaborate rightly with my team, I find myself that I've been delivering to these companies in time. Or even if I'm not even delivering like the product they want in time. Sometimes they just want feedback so that their business does not go elsewhere. If you're not giving them feedback, then oh, they're not communicating appropriately as a company, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I realized I've been delivering in time when I have a brainstorming session with my team, rather than saying, oh, I can do this on my own and doing like unnecessary research online without resorting to the people who have been here, different teams who work on this. Right. So that's just about having a brainstorming session with your team. Like brainstorming sessions are actually very important, right? It helps you document certain things you don't know of. It helps you, it gives more light to your research, right? You might think, oh, you're doing something the right way, or you're approaching something the right way, and somebody says something like, oh, let me research about this. This is true. And it gives more light to your research as a product manager, right? So the next is prototype. I had issues with this at first as a product manager, right? So, but constant research has really helped me in this prototyping stage. You should be able to envision, let me use that word, you should be able to envision what your product should look like, right? I tell people as a product manager, you are the vision guy, right? You are the one seeing ahead. You are the one, people are expected to understand things that they don't understand. Right? As the vision person, you should be able to envision what you're doing, and you should be able to put your visions down properly, pen and paper, and to drawings, right? So prototype, right? So by my definition here, what I have a prototype, right? Is the prototyping stage helps you get useful insights to help build and launch product faster. Prototyping stage is important to help you come up with structures for what your solution should look like, right? So recently had designs built on requirements, right? But when I saw this, when designs came out, I'm like, oh, this is not an envision for it. This is how I expect this to have gone. This is what I expect from this. And I realized is the absence of prototyping, right, is what affected delivery. We had to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, this is what the requirement says, but this is what we want based on user requirement, based on user needs, right? So prototype as the vision guy, right? You should be able to envision what your production looks like, right? Although you're not the designer in your company, you're not the one coming up with high fidelity design, all of that, right? But you should put your vision properly to pen and paper and be like, this is what we require of this. And we have two major types of prototype, right? But altogether, I listed four. I listed the physical prototype for testing your technology, the low fidelity prototype. These are interactive wireframes. We have the high fidelity prototype, realistic looking working simulation, right, where you can test to see how the movement between designs, right? And we have live data prototypes created by designers to prove it works, right? Why do I list these four types of prototype? Right. So going to product management, only two type of prototype struck me, right? I know of low fidelity prototype, I know of high fidelity prototype, but working as a product manager, because I did not have a technical background, I realized, oh, my designer, my developers could bootstrap something, right? For us to quickly test like the code to see if the code is responding the way we want the code to respond. I, to be sincere, I did not know you could make designs. You could make a technology without designs and you just bootstrap something, right? So that's where the physical prototype and the live data prototype comes to play. Low fidelity prototype is just you putting pen to paper and be like, okay, this is how we want the structure to be. This is how we want this to be interactive. And when you to interact with each other, and when you're brainstorming with your um sometimes customers, right? Because I've had situations where I talk about prototype with my customers, but especially your team members, right? We're talking about the interactive process of how the design should come in, right? You should be able to draw that out and be like, okay, this is how I want this to link to this. This is how I want this to communicate to this, right? You should be able to do that. For your high fidelity prototype, it's a realistic looking simulation, something you can play around, right, to see how it works, to see how the system communicates with each other, to see how the usage works, right? To see how one part connects to another part. So that's where your high fidelity prototype comes into play. And for your physical prototype and live data prototype, right? It's just for you to see how the technology works, to see if the technology responds the way it's supposed to respond. So let me give an instance of where this was in play. We had a solution, or we currently have a solution that we've written endpoints for, we've written the code base, like the data and the backend for, and we want to be sure if the backend was going to respond the way it was. And this was also the solution. We want to be able to transfer funds from this account to this particular account, right? You see, you've written the backend code, we've seen the code base, but we want to see how that structure works, right? That's where this physical prototype and live data type comes into play. I'm like, I have to talk to my developer. See, you've done this groundwork, right? We want to see how it works, right? You have to come up with something that we could use to test the solution to see, okay, if we do this, right, based on what it has written, right, and based on the endpoints it has consumed, right, this is going to communicate to this in this particular way, right? We did that to be able to test out what he has done, because at the end of the day, it's the backend is the structure really the structure of what we do as a company, right? So when he was able to do this for us, we understood, oh, it was communicating effectively the way we wanted, right? So that is where these other prototypes come into play. And this is just a visual representation of what a low fidelity prototype should look like and what a high fidelity prototype should look like, right? So for low fidelity prototypes, the applications you can use to come up with them most times, but not always necessarily required. You can always draw something. For me, I use my pen and paper. Sometimes I draw. Sometimes I use this draw application on my system. I'll be like, draw something. Tell my designer, this is how I want this to communicate with this particular place. And I do that mostly when we're adding like a new feature or when we are working on something new and we just want to come up with something. And I'll be like, okay, you see this particular place you designed, right? We want to add something to this, we want to improve on this. This should speak to this, right? I put pen to paper or I use my draw application. I'm like, okay, I've drawn this. This is how I want you to communicate this to on your this is how I want the communication to go on your designs, right? And for high fidelity prototype, right, it's just a live working simulation to see how the system moves from one pass to another. I like it when designs are done on Adobe XD, right? You can play with the designs, you can see them move from one place to the other. You can click on this particular button and see like the responsiveness of it, right? It's an application that I've loved to use over. I love my designers to use over time, right? So where I can play with it and be like, okay, oh, this is connecting to this, and it really helps the my developers most of the time, right? So when they're making my front end guys, when they're working on a particular solution, they can be like, oh, this is how it's supposed to move. This is what goes to what. This is what speaks to what, right? So that's just it on prototyping, right? I was able to list 4 types of prototype aside the popular low fidelity and high fidelity prototype, right, that we know of, right? And moving ahead to the final stage of design thinking, it's where I have implementation. And for me, unlike a lot of people that put final stage as testing, right, I put it as implementation, where I break down implementation into development and testing. Going from the beginning down here, we spoke about um, understanding the problem. We spoke about the ideation stage. We spoke about prototyping. We spoke about collaboration. That is your brainstorming session with yourself and your team members. And sometimes the brainstorming session with your customers, but not all the time because customers are praise requests. Let me just put that out there. So brainstorming with your customers, you have to be very careful, right? It's in the sense that customer A has a different request from customer B, and customer C has a different request from both of them, and like that. You should make sure you're developing solutions that meet customer requirements, right? So going from all of those stages down here, where we have implementation, right? In the final stage of design thinking is implementation. This is where the whole process comes together. This involves development and testing. Right. So development, let me just pick this first, is the result-driven process where design thinking action is put together to deliver specific results to drive business growth. Right. As I said earlier, you want to make sure you're building a good product. We're not building a product that will not satisfy our customer need. We're not building like a fancy product where you build a solution and at the end of the day, you're not meeting customer needs, right? So you should be at the development process, right? You should make sure your team is developing or coming up with something that drives that speaks to business growth, right? And drives success, right? So after all of this, um, after all 4 stages, right, of ideation, collaboration, and prototyping, you should make sure you're building something that speaks to your business growth, and we have testing. This is the final stage of design thinking process, which requires testing the quality of work done to see if it meets the desired requirements. At this point, you're checking the quality of work done. So I've been a QA product manager at some point where once the feature is released, before we go into production, I test personally to see what we've done, if this is what was intended, and if the quality is if the product is giving me the right quality as to what was given, as to the requirement that was given to developers, as to the requirement that was given to the team to build, right? So I want to make sure we're driving business growth by delivering quality out in the markets, which is very essential. I do my tests, right, to ensure that the product is meeting certain standards, met rather certain standards before we just take it out there and give it to people to consume, right? So testing can be in 2 different ways. Testing can be done internally and externally, depending on the goal of the business, right? So let me give to situation. I'll give two examples, right? I gave an example of me testing to ensure that the product meets quality. Currently, where I am, I have a QA who does the testing to ensure that my product is meeting a certain standard, is meeting certain quality based on the requirement I've written out, based on the requirement I've issued out to my devs, right? That's my internal testing. And I've had situation where we build a solution, we do our internal testing, the product meets certain standard and quality for us, but then we have certain users who do beta testing for us, and we'll be like, we'll reach out to them and say, we've done this, right, based on certain requirements, based on certain market needs, based on certain business needs, based on the fact that we think our business is growing and we need this as a company. We want you to test this out with us or for us, depending on the situation, and give feedback. One funny thing is one time I did beta testing with the client, right? We went through the system. I told him how, oh, this is how you navigate through the system. What do you think? And to my surprise, the guy was like, oh, give me login credentials. Let me do beta testing for you. I'll get back to you in 2 days. And we thought we've preferred the solution. There were some things that we skipped out. And when the guy was going to give us feedback, that guy gave us feedback. I can never forget. That guy gave us feedback in 6 pages of issues that we felt our system had on a Google Doc. That was one of the biggest shock of my career. Because we did internet testing, we felt it met quality, because we interviewed that guy before we did some of those features that we did at the time. And when he was going to do feedback, right, he gave us 6 good pages of feedback to look at and say, this is where the product is not meeting a particular standard. And then we explain, right, did like a flow of, okay, this is what is expected to be, this is what is expected to achieve. And when we reviewed the 6 pages as a team, we realized, oh, we did not really solve our customer problem, because we interviewed him as a customer and 2 other people as a customer, right? And this was the feedback we got in 6 pages as to why our product was not meeting certain standard, or why the new features that it was testing for was not meeting certain standard. And it was not that it was not meeting certain standard based on, oh, test was failing, because we did internet tests before giving it out to them to test. So we do not have a situation where, oh, we say, oh, the system is breaking, the test was failing, or it could not navigate through the system, or the system bandwidth or capacity was not strong enough for him to do what he needed to do, right? Although that was part of the issues, but it was minute compared to other feedback he gave, right, in 6 pages. And I remember us after that, like I called another customer and be like, oh, you went to the system, this is what we got from a customer, this is a feedback. And the guy was like, oh, there's certain feedbacks I saw, and I started listing some things. When we preferred with what the customer that gave us 6 pages, we even tried for us by writing 6 pages of notes for us to work on. We realized, oh, we did not really meet our customer needs, despite the fact that we did customer interview right before working on that product. So it took us about 2 months, right, to fix some of this issue, another customer test again. So we had like a timeline to go into production with that product at that time, but the customer feedback made us go back to our drawing book and be like, oh, see, this is the feedback we did. We're going to be using this document to go as our requirements, right? And we worked on some of those things that the customers spoke to us about, right? After doing our external testing. And surprisingly, when we were able to meet some of those requirements, right, we, after launching to production, and we updated our release note. I'm like, okay, this is a new feature we have. You can start using the system. And we realized that we had a huge turnover, right, after working on those requests, or on those things that our customer noticed during our external testing, right? The turnover was huge and turnover was massive. At that point, we were even shocked, and we're like, oh, we did not know, we're not properly solving customer problem, right? So depending on like your company, what you're trying to solve, right? One thing about testing is your testing can be internal, and sometimes your testing can be external, right? Depending on what your company is doing, right, and what you're trying to solve. And especially for startups, right, it's something that will be required, right? So with this implementation page, right, that I've spoken on, I've come to the end of my design thinking workshop topic, right? So I'll be entertaining questions from anyone, right? So I can answer your questions. And yeah, let's go from there. So if there's any question from anybody, I think I'm ready to take them. Hi, can anybody hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
So I'll be taking questions. So probably if you have a question in the chat box, someone can read it out to me because I'm not there in the chat room.
I have a question.
Okay.
If you
Sorry, somebody said she had a question. I cannot hear her.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. It was really wonderful. I learned a lot today. I just have a question. Our previous mentor already taught us, but I did not really understand it. It was very, very confusing. If you don't mind, can you please just differentiate like the differences between the prototype and the MVP? I don't understand the concept at all.
Okay, so your MVP is the minimum viable product, right? Your prototype is the visual representation of what you want your product to be. And so let me break it down as this, right? So you get to build MVPs in lots in startups and big companies, right? So because of the fact that, especially in the Nigerian system, right, where we use agile a lot, because I've not gone to any product management interview where they're not asking me, oh, what do you understand about the agile process, right? Companies like to churn out products in a certain time and be like, at this particular point, this is what we want to achieve. This is what we want to put out in the market while we're working on developing or improving the products further and working on developing, improving, and giving out new features to our users or our customers, right? Your prototype is a visual representation of what you intend your um, product to look like, right? But for MVP is a requirement to release a certain feature to your customer at a given period of time. So let me put it this way. So let me give an example. Okay, let me give an example of a product I've worked on, right? I've worked in device management. So I will use these products from time to time because the product I saw from start to finish before leaving, right? I was at the beginning stage of the product till the end. And this way, the services we're going to offer. We already defined our services as device up, we had the device inventory, and we had the monitoring. These are three services of that product that we needed. What our device up was just doing is device up would just show you, oh, these are the list of your online devices, these are the list of your offline devices. Device inventory is having an inventory page where you can onboard your devices. So I have a device with, for example, probably you have a phone with a particular INE number or a particular serial number, and you have your SIM card in this particular phone, right? We want to be able to put the details of this phone in the inventory page. Let's say the SIM card number, the INE number, and the type of the phone, right? And the monitoring aspect, which was the core purpose of our business, was divided into two. We had the playback and we had monitoring. So I've said we had device up, we had device inventory, and we had monitoring divided into two. Playback and the monitoring of your devices live on Google Map. So in these three products, right, of inventory and monitoring, what do you think should come first? For us, we need to have a way for the devices to be on the system. It was very important. It was an MVP at that time. And we needed to have monitoring. So if you can upload your device on your system, we needed to be able to monitor your devices. Being able to see online and offline device was none of your business at that particular point for the next, let's say, 3 to 4 months where we're building that product, right? We know our customers wanted to be able to onboard their devices. And when I put that device on the system and configure it, can I monitor that device on the live map? Right. That was what we gave them at that particular for that first iteration. And that was the MVP we churned out into the market. For the second MVP, right, we realized, oh, there was monitoring. I said monitoring was in two parts. There's the playback of monitoring, and there's the core monitoring to just see your devices on the live map. For the second iteration, we said, okay, let them see, let me say the next MVP, right? Let them see a device or a place showing them the list of online and offline devices. They can differentiate between them and let them be able to do playback. Playback was not a core function. It was just an additional benefit or an additional value we're giving at a particular point, right? It came in as a different MVP. But the first MVP was core function, a core value that was going to solve customer problem, right? So now MVP, we released like inventory and release monitoring, right? So just like doing a recap is MVP is trying out a product that is required to solve your customer's immediate need, while your prototype is a visual representation of what the product should look like. So I don't know if that was able to answer your question.
Yes, that was enough. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Okay. So I don't know if I have another question.
I have a question. Sorry, can I go ahead?
Yes, please. Your name, please.
Okay.
Please, I need to know your name. I
My
know
name
I'm
is
talking
Peace.
to
Peace.
Peace. Okay, that's
Yes.
fine.
Okay, so at the empathy stage while you were explaining, you said that you were saying something about how a product should have a problem that it is solving and it shouldn't just be a remake of an already existing product. But how do we talk about things like competition? Because if it's just a product that is solving a particular problem, they might probably get too comfortable, and it would be better if they have like competitors that are probably doing the same thing. So should we like completely steer clear of products that are not solving distinct problems from other products, or can we like try to find another way to solve the problem, or even maybe do what the um existing product is already doing and then look for market opportunities to like expand? And in our previous lectures we even learned that user needs are constantly evolving. So maybe is it okay to like begin a product that is probably just redoing what another product is doing, but then wait for opportunities to change, like wait for times when user needs have evolved and there are now different things that can be included in the product that we've made that will probably make it distinct from the already existing one. I hope you get my question.
Yes, I totally understand your question, and I think I should shed more light. Are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, please. And I think I should shed more light on that particular topic, right? Is let's put, I'll give two examples, right? Let's put for example, my company, for instance, I work at Africa Payments, and our core competitor is InterSwitch. And we keep trying as much as possible to climb the ladder to ensure that they themselves will see us as a competition, because now they are seeing us as the small boys in the industry, right? So currently my company solves a problem that InterSwitch solves, right? But we do other things that InterSwitch do not do as a company, right? Because InterSwitch has been in the market for 20 years, right? I think there's something I understand. And my company has been in the market for 4 years. How do we compete to somebody that's been in the market for 20 years? They're doing the same thing, they're known in the market. They come today and come and announce like lavish benefits that they give their users, and we're just here just trying to climb that corporate ladder with them. So over time, there are different values that we've been able to give as a company, right? That they don't give to make us stand out as a business, right? We know they give this particular value, this is what they do. Then we went ahead to say, see, let's give other solutions, right? Because it's easier for the banks to go to InterSwitch and be like, oh, process my card transaction. InterSwitch has connection with all the banks in Nigeria. We don't we have connection with some banks, right? But we have a way of connecting all of the banks in a different light that industry does. So what do you think we as a company are doing, and that some banks are partnering with us? Right. So we're giving like a different solution, a different value to their customers. Right. For instance, let's look at my example again, PiggyVest. Yes. Piggyvest has a solution, right? Carrywise has a solution. But if you look at those two products side by side, they are not exactly doing the same thing as their core product, right? They have other values that they use in pulling people together. Right. In the example I gave earlier, I don't want to call this particular application because I did testing for them at that point, is they were solving, you look at my company, for instance, I said 4 years in the market, industry 3 years in the market, industry which is known. We are just here, we are doing our best. And a lot of people, so quite some, like a lot of people know us, like not as much as they know InterSwitch, but this particular solution with the test I did, comparing to Piggyvest that's been in the market for about 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, right, is they were solving exactly the same problem interest which was Piggyvest is solving without giving additional value, right? So they had, oh, you come, you save your money in our um in our system, you we're thinking of working on investments which you don't have currently. What else were they giving? Oh, you can lock your savings, right? Those are like the core value they were giving. You save your money on our system, and oh, you can lock your savings for a particular period of time. And I was like, guy, this is not your core product that you're doing. These people have other things. They have the save money in dollars. They have the Investify. You can invest money. They have the safe lock already. They have the savings already, where they give you certain points for the amount of money you save, right? You had no point you were giving, right? They had like different value. They have customer retainership value that they give to their customers to keep them loyal to the system, right? So customer needs are evolving, right? Just like my company did. We are solving exactly same thing as InterSwitch is solving. We are giving certain benefits or giving certain values that they don't give. They're a big company, they don't need to give as much value, the kind of values that we're giving, right? It's already known. We're giving certain values that we know that they're not giving, right? And that's how we're going to pull people to the company, to the system over time, right? But solving like a particular product for a solution for something that has, I think the applications like Piggyvest are not, if I'm correct, the applications that does what Piggyvest do, probably with a different value or something, a different value proposition as their core product. And I think this should be up to, if I'm being sincere, it should be up to 30 in Nigeria. I've lost count of all the serious applications we have, or I've lost count of all the uh, fintechs we have in Nigeria. Is just a lot, right? But solving for somebody else, for solving something else, what Piggyvest was solving for as a core product without giving extra value was what I actually was referring to at that particular point, right? So I don't know if this answers your question. Is if this answers your question, right? They should be able to give core value or give extra value to what they are doing, but not solving like the same problem, right? And giving lesser value. I think that's where I was going driving at.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Peace.
Hello, good evening,
Good evening. Your name, please.
Zoe.
Chloe.
Zoe.
Oh, oh. From Grownish. Okay.
Yeah. So building on pieces question, or like in the case of like ride sharing apps, because we have Uber, we have Bolt, we have Rider, we have InDriver. Definitely InDriver. Then they brought a new value that they could bring to customers. But Bolt and Uber, like Uber came to Nigeria first, then Bolt came. Bolt overtook Uber. Everybody moved to Bolt. Like, do you get what I mean? Like in that situation, what was the value that Bolt was adding to users that made them migrate? Because I can't even recognize it. Because that's what I was just thinking about as you're explaining this.
Okay. That's where strategy comes into play, right? Product strategy, I think, is a different topic. And let me explain that strategy because it was something I looked at closely, right, when they came. We're all using Uber, right? When Bolt came to overtake Uber, I think some years back, and someone like, oh, there's an application called Bolt. What was the strategy? I remember vividly where Bolt was cheaper, was why they were able to, that was like That was just market strategy, but not anymore. That was the market strategy they used. I think let me place three side by side. Let's look at both. Let's look at Uber and let's look at, I've not used the InDriver before, so I cannot speak for their product. And let's look at Rider, right? This point is, I won't really put this under design thinking, but put this under product strategy and product and market strategy, right? It's the strategy to which they come into the markets that really helps them. Both came in that time, they said they had cheaper fares. A lot of people, including me, around to both that time. Then later on, I just downloaded Uber again, let's say 2 months back, when they started giving us Uber Go. That's another market strategy that they brought into the system. Like, oh, we have Uber Go, it's cheaper than any other ride in Lagos. I can easily just use Uber Go to go to where I'm going to. And so far, we're using Uber Go. I think the highest I've ever paid on Uber Go is 1,600 naira for a very long distance. And then there's Rider. And what's the Rider strategy in the market? Rider will tell you, oh, you can negotiate your price, but unlike Uber and Bolt that's already in the markets, right? How can we compete with them? You negotiate your price, even if you're inside 8 hours traffic, right? When your driver gets to your destination, if we say you're going to, for example, Yaba to Aja for 4,000 naira, right? If boat carries you and there's traffic on the road, you pay 8,000 naira at the end of the day. But if you carry you at that 4,000 naira rate, right? Even if you're inside 10 hours of traffic to get to your destination, that price does not move. I think that falls under marketing strategy, product and marketing strategy and branding. Hi, Zoe.
Yeah, yeah, I like your answer. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have another question in the audience.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Francesca. I'm
Sorry, I didn't
wondering
hear
at
you.
what point, my
Your
name is
name is
Francesca.
Oh Francisca.
Francesca. Yeah. So at what point do we introduce the minimum viable product? Is it at the same prototype stage or is totally different?
Okay, so let me explain this vividly well. What I do. This is what I do. Because I don't like stress sometimes, right? You have your, from the beginning, you have your empathy stage. You understand what your customer wants. You have your definition stage. You have your collaboration stage. You have your prototype and you have implementation. Now, at the empathy stage is understanding your user problem. If your user gives you 5 problems, this is what we want to be able to do. This is what we want to be able to do. This is what we want to be able to do. These are 5 things we want. And to come into the market, right, in a very good time, probably you're having 3 months to build our solutions, and these are heavy solutions. And within that 3 months, you evaluate and say, my sprints are 2 weeks each. 2 week sprints for 3 months is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sprints, right? And within that 6 sprints, right, you have your testing phase where you and QA will test before going to production. So within 6 weeks, you have 5 sprints, or most likely 4.5 sprints, to come up with 3 solutions, right? So let's say your user wants to be able to have an overview page to see transactions. They want to have a transaction page where they can download transactions. They want to have a wallet page where they can fund their wallets. And they want to have like a profile page where they can probably change their password, do certain things and other things to things on the system. What is more important to your user at that particular page? At that particular stage, of course, user settings, right? So you want to do some settings on your page. Your wallet is probably your core value that you're giving at that particular point. For them to be able to fund their wallet and send money out of their wallet, right? You have transactions. It's just for them to see, oh, transaction, visibility of transactions we've done. And in transactions, let's say you have other things like download transactions, right? Send transactions to a particular, send transactions out to somebody. And on your wallet, you have fund wallets, you have transfer funds, right? Fund wallet and transfer funds very important to you. Having an overview page for them to, for visibility is important to you. On your transaction, you have to burn down this transaction and see, they can view transaction, but they can't do download transactions now, right? They can't do send transaction now. Let's use Kuda as an example because I watch products that I use closely. When I started using Kuda, right, you could send your transaction out only in PDF. But recently, when I upgraded the app, like a couple of months ago, I realized you could send transaction in PNG to somebody on WhatsApp or to share to somebody else, right? That was some a value they could deliver, but they had to pen it down and say, see, this is not a core value now. Let's work on our users seeing transaction, right? Let's work on our users funding their wallets. And very important, you cannot say, I'm keeping somebody's money. Let's give the user access to send that money from their wallet out to somebody else. It's now at the brainstorming session, right? You will now say, these are the core values, our 4 core values that we're giving out, right? They want to have these values. They want to be able to see their web page. They want to be able to see their wallet balance. They want to be able to see transactions, and they want to have the user profile page. Now, within all of these values that you're giving your user, these are your core values. There are other values in between these 4 core values that you have to be like, let's pin this down. For transaction, let them see their transaction, but they cannot send in certain formats. Or we say, oh, they see their transaction, they screenshot their transaction, they can't send that transaction out now. Let's just give them a list of all of their transactions because we need to keep visibility for that. For your wallet, we want to say, okay, they should be able to send money to their wallets. They should be able to send money out of their wallets, right? Wallet history is probably a different value for that you're giving to your user, different from transaction history. Since transaction history shows some things, let's spend wallet history out. This is how I've defined wallet history. Let's just leave it out for now. We'll work on this later. So you should go to this within your 4 products that you want, 4 core values that you want to give. Sub values within them, you should be able to define, you should be able to at your brainstorming session say, we're giving these 4 core values out, but the sub values within them, we're pinning this out for now. Right, we're dropping this out for now. Let's bring out these core values that can help them do certain transactions and give it to them while we work on number 1, improving these 4 core values we're giving them. Number 2, adding other features to these 4 core values for them later on. So it's at your brainstorming section, you will define, after you've defined your values, say your values, but these sub values, we're keeping them out here. Let's give these core values, I call them core values, out first before going to our sub values, right? Is something our users can do without, right? Let's just take it out now. So let me give a physical example of something I've done, right? When I was in device monitoring, right, we had single device monitoring, we had multiple device monitoring, and we had playback. Playback was a big deal. We took 3 months to work on playback. What playback simply means for us is you put a tracking device in your car for your driver, right? You're not tracking, you can't be carrying your phone and be tracking every time, right? We want you to be able to play back activity of that driver to see where they've been before now, right? Monitoring was a core value, but we knew our priorities. We knew we wanted them to give them visibility of this is the location your device is on a single device map, on a live map where you can see all of it. Probably you have like 4 vehicles with different drivers that are monitoring for you. We should see that on a live map and their specific location. Before working on playback, they told us, oh, we wanted to see the way the device, we wanted to see device movements. We worked on device moving on the single device monitoring. They can see as the device is moving live. So if your device is on the road and it's moving, you're seeing it live. Playback was a big deal, but it was a different value that we're delivering. We had to pen playback, deliver all of this value of single device monitoring, live device monitoring, visibility or seeing your device movements on the road live. Before now going to playback and say, okay, you were not with your phone when your driver was moving, but probably the driver told you, oh, I was in Yaba from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, right? I'm like, are you sure the driver was in Yaba from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock? So can I get them the value of, okay, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, play back what your driver was doing at that particular point, right? Before we gave them that value, we gave them every other aspect of monitoring. They used it for some time while we're working on giving them playback to see history of device movements, right? Is that brainstorming section of like, well, the team was like, let's give them this, pen this out, right? And we'll give this to them at a later period and we'll put a timeline to it. Hello.
Thank you.
Yes. So do we have another question?
Hey, good evening. I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just need more light on the defined problem, like a little more explanation to like break down most of what you said. That's all I need.
Okay, so
A brief set like problem statement, let me say.
okay. I think we're all ladies here, right? Oh,
Yes, yes.
mhm. Have you ever
We
had a
are three ladies.
situation? Yes. So I've had a situation where your friend is going through heartbreak. You know how ladies is now, how we are. I'm like, oh, she's going through heartbreak. I'm like, oh, you're consoling that person. I'm like, oh, he doesn't deserve it. You're better off. Even when we know it's a lie, you're not better off anywhere. Right. At that point, you're empathizing with your friend, right? You understand what is paining her, you understand where it's paining her. Maybe what's the empathy on that part at that point is, oh, when they think they pain her and I say, she has spent 4 years with this boy and he left, right? You've empathized with her. You then the definition stage is you understand what her problem is. This is your problem. This is what it is. You invested 4 years to something you're not supposed to invest 4 years to, or to a relationship that it was obvious you're not supposed to invest 4 years to, right? Then you go again and be like your brainstorming session, probably a group of friends, right? At that brainstorming session where you collaborate, everybody will say, you deserve better. This everybody give their different solutions. You brainstorm, everybody you bring their own talk about the whole situation, right? Then we have the prototyping stage when we say, this is what your future should be like. This is what we're envisioning for your future. Move on, right? That's the prototyping stage where we're done like, okay, you have to move on for this situation. Then the implementation stage is probably she gets out of that situation and she's with somebody else who obviously everybody feels is better than who she was before. Right. I just use the relationship problem situation as something we can relate to it. So your empathy stage is where you understand who your customers are, you understand your problem, right? Make sure that's probably where I think I use the piggy vest situation and this other company. Make sure you're solving a problem that needed to be solved at a particular point, not solving a problem that's in the market that is saturated, not in the market that is saturated, probably like hundreds of it in the market, right? Without delivering a different core value. Understand where, like, probably want to build a fintech application, understand what people want. See, user needs are dynamic. User needs are not static. There are different user needs outside. Probably you are solving a problem for a particular user group. I'm like, this is the problem you're facing. Then you have a definition page. So that is where you pen down what this is. This is the problem. This is your research about this particular problem. This is where you now define what that problem is. You take your time, take a deep breath to understand what that problem is. Then you now be like, okay, I've spoken to the customers or I've done a market research based on surveys, based on research, based on studying a particular user group, right? Then you come to your team and be like, okay, this is the problem. This is the definition of the problem. This is what it is. Now let's brainstorm. What do you think it is? For example, your technical lead is there. Technologies, they say, on the technical side of this, what do you think you can do as a company? What do you think is required on the back end? What do you think is required technically? On the business side of things, you have a business group. How do we go to market? How do we sell this? This is the problem. When we solve for this, when we do this and this, how do we sell? right? If it's an already existing company and you have a customer success team, you'll be like, this is what we did the research for. This is what we've defined the problem as. How do you think this can help your customers as a customer service lead? Right. This is where you now have a brainstorming session. Everybody gives their 2 cents, and this is what it is. And based on that, you come and have a visual representation of this is what the product should be, this is what the product should look like, this is what we are solving for should look like, and this is how the interactive process should be. Right. So when you've done that, you now come down to the implementation side. This is where you make sure you're building a product that meets number one, business needs, number two, market need. Very important, right? And then you test out what you have and be like, is this thing responding the way it ought to respond? Is this thing delivering the value it's supposed to deliver? Then you test that out both internally and externally, however way you want to test that out before churning it out. So I don't know if that was good enough to help you out. Hi.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Any other question from anyone? Hello, hi everyone. So is there any question in the chat box that somebody would like to read out to me? Okay. I thought I heard someone speaking.
There are no questions in the chat room.
Okay, but okay, thank you so much. Any other question from anyone? Okay, so if there are none, right, just want to be sure one last time if I have any questions. So if there are none, so I'll just be like, thank you so much for having me. So I am still Tammy, right, product manager or technical product manager for Aka
I'm
Payments.
sorry. I'm sorry, please.
Okay.
Where
Oh,
can we
no,
reach
go
you,
on.
ma'am? Please, where
Huh?
can we reach you? Where can we reach you? Like, what social media can we reach
Okay,
you?
so I will share my LinkedIn with in the chat box soon. Yes. So thank you. My name is Tammy. I'm a product manager at Aka Payments, right? It's an issuing and switching company. So next time you're using your ATM card to do POS withdrawals, to do ATM withdrawals, just bear it in mind that it's a company that processes that transaction, right? And make sure your card is delivering money from your bank account if you actually have money in that account. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. The class was
Thank
awesome.
you so much,
Very
Ma.
good.
Thank you so much, Ma. I loved the class.
Thank
I'm
you, ma.
grateful.
Thank you very,
I'm
very
not
Thank
mal, I'm
well.
you.
actually
Thank you.
upcoming. So it was nice meeting everybody. I would have loved to see our faces because I don't know when next I will see anybody here again, if that's allowed.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody has ever asked to see anybody's face.
So because so this I like working with women, right? It's not every day I get to be in a situation where I get to see like women doing something or yeah.